Thank you very much for hosting us, Katrin and Go Euro, and thank you everyone for coming tonight. What a fantastic turnout despite Christmas being close by and all of the Christmas parties happening, so really appreciate you being here. Just a little bit of a background. This is actually our 5th panel discussion that we're doing on this topic on helping managers become better managers. We've done one in Boston, San Francisco, and New York, and last week in London, and now in Berlin, our hometown, which is very exciting. So when I say our, I mean Small Improvements. My name is Linda, and I work for a company called Small Improvements. We're a performance management software to help companies communicate better internally. And our lovely founder, Per, is with us today. Hi. And Per set out 6 years ago to come up with a software that would support a team that believes in ongoing praise and feedback and communication, in dedicated one-on-one meeting notes, agile objectives, and just being able to communicate around that. And the thinking was that if you then have a little bit of 360 feedback from your peers around you, the performance review kind of turns into a performance preview, and you have that ongoing feedback loop throughout, just making performance management lean and agile. So 700 something clients in 36 countries later, we got asked by a lot of our clients, well, software is one thing, but how can we help the people using it get better, and what are others doing? So why don't we kick off with a few introductions here? Do you just maybe want to all say your name, your title, where you're coming from, and a brief background?
I can do that. Hi, I'm Jennifer Beecher. I am the Director of Learning and Development at SoundCloud, and I've been doing that for exactly, what date is it? I guess like 12 days now? I do have a background in everything that's related to people and how they function, but I also have a background in engineering and product management. So I'm bringing a bit of a product perspective into L&D, I think.
Wonderful. Hi, I'm Lawrence. I'm a managing director of the Trainer Academy Munich. It's actually the oldest startup in Berlin because it's 42 years old, and the team is more or less my age. We're rebuilding this company. It's a training company, and I'm management trainer and communication trainer since 4 years now. And my back story is that I was a professional dancer, world champion in Latin American dances, and then I changed my profession to management. And since 10 years, I'm in the startup scene now, and I'm totally enjoying it.
Fantastic. We'll hear some references from the sporting world to what that means to modern management. Awesome.
So my name is Cindy. I'm from a company called Marley Spoon. We bring market fresh and easy cooking back to the people. I am the head of culture and people operations. And it's so actually I was brought in because the founders, when they started the company 2 years ago, they had a very clear idea about the culture at Marley Spoon. We have our 10 values. They're written all over, they're in the toilet, they are at every wall visible, so they have a very clear idea about the culture. But as we are growing, in 2 years we're now 500 plus employees, and we are 6 people in the culture and people operations team. So we wanted to scale, or the founders wanted to scale, and that's why they took me on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is very exciting. So we'll have a little bit of strategy, a little bit of learning and development, and then a learning and development provider kind of thing together on stage. The format is roughly 40 minutes now of panel discussion, and then some Q&A. So please come up with some great questions and grill our panel. Let's just start defining what is a manager in your organizations. What do they do? What's the role of them? Just so that we all have the same understanding.
So we have different types, of managers in the title. You get people managers, which is the definition I'm going to apply here, which is basically a direct line manager and the person who will do things like performance management and feedback conversations. But we do have other roles like tech leadership, eng management, which has slightly different interpretations and may or may not contain people management. People management is the generic term we use for anybody who has a direct report. And it implies expectations like holding feedback conversations, working on personal development plans, managing the promotion processes, the admin stuff on top. And then there are roles like engineering managers, which implies people management. There are roles like product managers. So for this conversation, I'm going to use the definition of people management.
Thank you.
Perfect. I would like to say people management is the management I would like to talk about. Actually, we have a lot of titles with management, and quite often I think it's just getting stuff done and managing stuff, and in the end, managing stuff as stuff meaning people. It means you have to have this kind of individuals and giving them purpose and giving them direction and knowing what everybody's doing, and then we have the mess already. So this is people management.
Cindy, what's a manager at Marley Spoon?
A manager at Marley Spoon. So when I had my interviews, the founder Fabian told me that managers we do have managers, but managers are at the bottom. So first of all, we have the customers. Everyone is working for the customer, not for the manager and not for the boss, not for Fabian himself. And then he started to draw up the org chart, so the customer in the middle, and then all the different departments. And then he said, and then the role of the manager, it was, because I am from this classical HR background, okay, where is the manager? And then he said, Cindy, managers, they are at the bottom. I said, okay, interesting, yeah, because we have a reversed pyramid. So actually, it's the manager makes sure to enable everyone else so that everyone else can do their job. So actually, the manager is working for the employees and not the other way around. That's the philosophy at Marley Spoon.
Any more comments to that?
Actually, I would like totally to underline that, because I said also serve as the number one attitude you should have as a manager. In the end, as a manager, you have to empower your employees. You have to give them every resource they need so they can do what they are paid for. And if you as a manager having your role defined as I'm above, I'm the person who everything is about, you're totally wrong, because you are there to give the direction, give the resources, give the time, give the time for developing, having time for questions, all this stuff. And quite often it's just being like a spreadsheet person and saying, okay, you didn't do this, and next time I want you to do more. And this is totally not managing.
Exactly, because sorry, I've lost my. So this spreadsheet management, that's actually now part of my role, where I make sure I get the data, and I am comparing locations and departments, and I'm the one saying like, oh, why is your one-on-one rate higher than the one there? So I'm actually going back to them, and so actually at Marley Spoon, being a manager is a really tough job. They are in charge of quite a few things, and they own it. So it's my role to help them manage their people. So it's not they are with other classical organizations where it's like the manager just shuffles it off to, oh, it's people management, oh, that's HR is in charge, and oh, we find someone to blame there. At Marley Spoon, it's the other way around, and which is, again, why the founder said we want to have the HR department as small as possible. And also, to link back to what you said, our 10th value is no ego. So the founder, he makes sure that the people he brings in have no ego, and obviously we all have an ego. So he makes sure that we all always feel a little bit uncomfortable, because if we are feeling too comfortable, we're not performing, or we don't want, there is no edge where we're going to. So it's this no ego, and he really makes sure that none of us have an ego, and obviously we do. So every once in a while it's quite tough, also for me.
It sounds like we're kind of in the middle, so the structures are traditional, the values behind it aren't, so we seem to be in a mix, and I would actually I mean, personally, I fully hear you on that approach. It's very aligned with my values, but I would go even further and just remove the word managing, because managing is completely inappropriate to that role, right? Then it's facilitation-ish, and I wouldn't even call that a manager. Like the expectation, I guess they say you manage things, you lead people is one of the cliche phrases around it, but there is something to it. I would not necessarily call it managing then.
Yeah, that's true, because we call it team lead.
There's another maybe idea I would like to share is from dancing, because the man is leading, but the purpose of the man is make the woman look nice. So I'm the frame and she's the picture. And in the end, I'm still leading, so I'm giving the impulse, I'm saying where to go and how to do it, but I'm empowering her to be fast, to be quick, to stand straight, and being a beautiful picture. So it's not about me. Therefore, all men are dressed black and the women are in bright colors. And it is very interesting, even if the man is like also presenting himself, it's always the unconsciousness, it's about her, it's about her, it's about even if I'm saying what to do. And this is maybe also a kind of understanding for managing. So it's not about my title of being your manager, it's what I can do to make you look better, and then you will perform, and then you can shine, and then you can have the, how to say, the benefits from it as well. Yeah? And I'm shining through her as well.
That actually makes me reflect on that division between eng manager and people manager, which is exactly that. We have tech leads that might have the responsibility for actually doing architectural decision, and the eng manager is really there as an enabling role to do exactly this part, right? Is to understand how the team can gel better to help you develop in your journey. So as much as we are within a more traditional structure, it sounds like it really does resonate with some of these approaches.
Excellent. That was a great discussion in itself, and it went deeper than I thought at this point, but awesome. So if that people manager is someone to support others and to lead and really like the bottom of the organization, that's fascinating, then what makes a great manager? Like, what is one of the, maybe you can share what you wrote on your name tags as well. What is something, therefore, that makes this person, and we can discuss later whether we need another name for manager at this point or not. What makes someone particularly great at their job?
So I wrote down self-reflection, and this was a really tough call. The reason I wrote it down is because I have the firm belief, and this can totally be challenged, that the higher you up, the more influence you have, and whether that's higher or lower, but kind of the more you're an amplifier, the more you yourself need to be able to adjust to the people around you. And that requires self-reflection, because without you yourself and the organization being able to reflect at what your strengths are, where your gaps are, you can't grow in that direction. So self-reflection might not be the top, like the hierarchy implied in there might not be the right thing, but for me it's the root of everything. And only if I know the values and the stuff I project onto other people, the biases I have, and kind of know my own preferences and my expectations, I can communicate them clearly and I can manage dealing with them. Only then can I start to really become effective in handling group dynamics with several people involved. That's my personal approach.
I think in my personal experience, as soon as I'm not aware of the full situation, employees instantly reflect that. So they will instantly ask the right questions, they will instantly give you feedback in terms of what we're doing here, why we're doing this, why we're not doing that. So, and then having no ego and being able to say, you're totally right, you know, this is a blind spot, I have to work on it, and I will come up with a solution. So providing the team as much support for the current situation as possible, from my perspective.
I think that's the question itself sounds very easy, but I think it's a very difficult question to answer. And I also think it's dependent on the company that you're working for. Are you a big company, a small company? Have you been around for 100 years or just 2 years? What is your, at the companies that I've worked for, so every recruitment process, you already need to know what kind of a person that you're looking for. So the manager that you bring in needs to already fit to what's already there, or potentially not. Maybe you want to have the absolute opposite. So I find it I think for managers, too, they need to find the right place for them, just as every employee needs to find the right home to shine.
If it is someone that is serving and self-reflected who can listen very well, is that what you guys wrote down on your name tags as well, or is there any other thinking in the audience maybe? Maybe shout out some of the words that you wrote down. You all filled it out, I can see it. Yes.
So I've written down to inspire.
To inspire.
Should I explain it more, or do you want to?
No, please.
Okay, I think inspiring is basically planting the seed of intrinsic motivation. So if you're there to inspire someone, then they are intrinsically motivated, and they are empowered by themselves to do so. They don't need the push from the outside; they have the push from the inside. And I think this is really important. It's more in the direction of the leader, of course, the leadership, and less of the manager who is really doing. But I think this distinction is maybe also very obsolete. But yeah, that's my point.
Is there a difference between management and leadership? Another great panel discussion.
So I have empathy, and I also see a lot of other people who had empathy. And I think self-reflection is a big part of empathy in understanding yourself and understanding your impact on others. It's a big part of being in a group. First knowing yourself, and then how to help and serve others.
Thank you. Anyone else? That is a very individual thing as well. How do you inspire others, and how can you therefore be empathetic? Is it something that one can learn or develop further, or do you come with it or not?
That's actually exactly the question I'm grappling with, because I dream of building in these foundational skills into the organization, so you have to worry less about formal training if you have these very foundational skills of being able to self-reflect, empathize, have control over a toolkit of ways of communicating. I think there's certainly things you can do, and I mean, it's all basically neural flexibility, right? Like it's adapting, trying to create those pathways if you don't have them as strongly, and there's exercises to do that. The question is almost an ethical one, I think. How far are you allowed to go in trying to modify people's behaviors and value systems when you try and set up an organization? And from a certain scale, you can't just hire people who are like that. At some point, you're going to have to figure out, like, how do I try and do inception and implant this in people's heads? Like, and ethically, like, what right do you have? I find that very interesting. I think it's possible and it's desirable to a certain extent, and I think empathy is something that is incredibly valuable and necessary, but I think it still has to be a responsible environment and where people have control over their process. It shouldn't turn into this brainwashing thing where all of a sudden, like some trainings are, right? Like where you have this completely unprepared moment the first day where there's like utter self-reflection, you're totally not ready, and you're like, wow, okay, everything's breaking down, and who am I, what am I doing? I think that's almost irresponsible, right? Yes, it has great effect if it works, but for everybody else, it's a total trauma. So I think it's possible, needs to be used responsible, but I think actually building it into the value system, like I worked for Nokia, one of the values was empathy. How brilliant is that? If the company as such ensures that you want to care about how other people feel and you want to have that connection, that for me is one of the biggest things you can do, is make it part of your culture explicitly.
Actually, for me, this empathy, when I did my HR studies 8 years ago, that was in the UK, CIPD it's called, and the first lesson was, we want you all passionate, empathetic people to be dispassionate. So I was like, if you know me, I'm the most passionate, empathetic person you can have in front of you. For me, this was a shocker. I couldn't even concentrate the rest of the day. And I was just like, why? Like, why? What this no passion? Like, but you're dealing with people. You're dealing with emotions. Like, of course, there needs to be passion. And what I learned in these last couple of years is like, yes, in order to, if you take your passion out and do it more controlled, in a controlled way, then you can make more objective decisions and you are closer to getting the win-win for the company as well as the person that you have in front of you. So this contribution to empathy, I think definitely needs to be there, but in a controlled way.
Okay, I'm not controlled about that. I personally think that passion, inspiration, empathy, so all the soft skills are, I don't know how to say. I never did something, so for one day when I didn't feel like, okay, I should be here and there's a purpose for me, or I feel welcomed. Day one when I realized, okay, here's no purpose for me anymore, I really quit. So, but I'm maybe a little bit hard in that, but for my retrospective, I always won in this equation. So always comes something new where I had purpose again, and where I had an environment where I think people inspired me to be part of. And I really, for the first big part of my life, I always looked for a coach, a mentor, a person who is inspiring me, so who's putting a flame into me. But I first of all let them do that, so it was a decision by me. And second of all, I was always empowered to turn that off again, because once I was in this kind of brainwashing kind of company, I was working for zero money, just on commission. And it was really like the Darth Vader of cold calling I was working for, and was incredible time. I learned like crazy. He was like a best-selling author, and he was a very well-paid trainer and coach, and I just knew for me, I can learn so much in this company, in this environment. I don't care about this money, you know. The money I'm not earning is so much more worth in terms of time and but as soon as I was at a level where I see, okay, now the equation doesn't work for me anymore, I really said, okay, now I have to leave, because otherwise I'm kind of in this brainwashing system. It was very far away from all the competitors. They even told me what books to read and what not to read, and then I started to realize, okay, this is crazy. It's like it's not healthy anymore.
The question is whether that's coming from the company or the manager, right? Is it the passion that you have for your job as being a manager, or for the organization, what they stand for, and how much a manager should then be influencing their team or not? Is it coming from the company level? Like you have both of you, you know, music and food is topics that everyone can belong to, but or you know that we all love, I think. And is it coming from the manager though, who should be inspiring like the passion and the purpose?
I think it's both, and both attract a certain type of people. You will have people who thrive in these environments, and you have people who don't thrive in these environments. So it's again about finding who are you, the self-reflection, and where do you thrive. I think it's coming both from the manager. They also say people don't leave companies, they leave their manager. I think, but the general purpose is for the company. You want to bring the company forward, so you have to go along with it. And the manager helps you inspire.
Do we believe that? Meanwhile, just quick hands up in the audience, who believes that people leave managers, not companies? Okay, that's roughly half. Who doesn't? Who thinks that it's not true?
I think sometimes it's just structures you leave.
Sometimes it's just structures that you leave.
In a small company, or you leave a special system, but also sometimes the managers you leave. It's the system and the managers.
The system and the managers.
To that answer, maybe why is the manager above me? He also can be the person which is inspiring me to stay. So if he's part of the system, but he's also like a flame I would love to, be part of. I think even in a huge company like Deutsche Bahn, there can be somebody as a manager or the team lead I would love to work for. So even though I'm not a big fan of Deutsche Bahn, maybe this person is somebody I give my time.
Awesome. And after you answer that, also let's chat about how important a manager really is, because I mean that puts so much importance on a manager in every organization.
So I was just reflecting on the fact that we have all kinds of people who are passionate about the actual thing we do at SoundCloud, and people who want to do good work, but kind of a common thread is wanting to have impact and wanting to grow. So if you can cater to that, I think that tends to, with the kinds of people that we have in our organization, that tends to do the trick. And what was the question again? Sorry.
How do we put too much importance on managers? Or
So the reason
are they really?
like, again, we come back to my participatory approach, right? Where I would say that person doesn't give purpose if they facilitate purpose within the people they work with. And the importance depends on the people that you have in the team, how much they're able to cover that themselves. There are teams that are incredibly self-sufficient that don't need much of that. And there are teams that have less experience or less of that skill set to be able to do that, which is why I find it so important to empower teams and groups of people in general process, right? It's like if all of you had tools to be able to effectively work together with different types of people and to facilitate decision making, to first be clear about what are your expectations, your values in decision making, what do you expect, how participatory do you want to be, then to choose from a toolkit and then to actually work together and to visualize what you do in the process to be able to work with it better, you would need a lot less of this one person doing this. So I think right now the dependency is really high, but that shouldn't be the case. I think it would be amazing if we could just empower people to do it themselves so they need less of this.
At Marley Spoon, so my team, we have one person driving technology, and that person is in charge of making all the tools that we have communicate with each other. If they don't, she's on the phone to all our service providers to have the API linked here and there, and just making sure that that systems talk, that we automate as much as possible so that the manager doesn't have to do too much admin work. We have someone in charge of processes. Together with the management team, we create the processes. Then we help everyone. We train everyone to do these processes, and then we offboard them. So it's again offboarded onto the manager. And our role is to make them successful, make sure that they are actually owning the KPIs of retention, like, because in other companies it's like, HR has the KPI, and okay, has it gone up and down? Okay. But at Marley Spoon, it's the manager who owns these KPIs. So so the manager is very important at Marley Spoon, because they have a huge responsibility, and obviously if they don't perform, they don't add value, they shouldn't be there.
You even have one-on-ones from HR with every manager, is that right?
Yeah.
Let's go into some more specifics now into how we can help managers.
My main KPI is the one-on-one. So we have 500 people and 500 growing, and every single person has at least once a month a one-on-one. And what is so you have your jour fixe. So there's also a definition. So what is a jour fixe and what is a one-on-one? Jour fixe is about your potentially weekly talk about this is the progress on your work that you've done. And the one-on-one at Marley Spoon it's all about the person. Like how are you? Who are you? What is happening in your life? How are you coping with this environment at Marley Spoon? Because what we believe is if we build trust in these one-on-ones, and if we get to know each other, then we find conflicts early. And because we find conflicts early between everyone in the organization, again, less people need to knock on my door, and I need to be less mediating between people, because the connection between the managers and the employees has been established, and they can talk openly. So for us, it's a very, very strategic, and it's my main KPI.
So you let them talk openly, and then HR's role is to coach the managers. So that would mean that HR is really at the bottom, no?
Yeah, but in the end, we well, ideally, like, I'm just monitoring the KPIs, yeah?
What was the question again? No, actually, I don't know. Is it the importance of the manager, or how to empower managers?
Well, so yes, we started on how important managers really are, and then established that they are still very important. Ideally, we'd manage them out if we could, but really we're still relying very much on them. So to come to a little bit more practical advice now, what are things to help managers succeed? And I think, it's exciting to hear what HR and learning and development can do.
Okay, first of all, I think self-reflection, as you're saying, is definitely a big pair of shoes everybody has to wear when he's manager, because he needs to reflect on himself so he can reflect on reaction of his people. And which I think is highly critical is being able to receive feedback and to give feedback, and this in a very respectful way and in a very honest and a decent way, because very, very often people don't talk to each other in the real matter. So they are, thank you very much, and then they're talking totally different to other people. So, and this is really, I think, quite often the case, and you can actually learn to open up to others, and you will instantly receive opening up by the others to yourself. And you always have to go in making the first step. And I don't care if you're the manager, the leader, or the smallest team servant member or whatever, you have to be the first call. It's your responsibility to give the other person the opportunity to understand, okay, I'm an honest guy, I don't have a hidden agenda, and I'm open to feedback, to conversation, to changing things.
Effective feedback. Opening up. What else?
We have one meeting a week with all the team leads. So that's, I'd say, 15 people, 2 continents, US and Europe. And that meeting is recorded. So because we are about open communication, so we also want our people to hear what is actually being said in these strategy meetings. And why is it recorded? Because obviously, we're all management, and obviously we have strong personalities. So this is one way where we learn about ourselves, because we have actually had tough conversations, and if afterwards we say whoa, why did it end up like this? We go back to the recording and we actually listen to ourselves. And by listening to ourselves, you learn a lot. Yeah, it hurts, and you learn a lot.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, I think along the same lines. I think an enabler for me is generically a very clear expectation about what that management role means, because if you don't know the expectation as a manager, you can't fulfill them. Creating a culture of both authenticity and vulnerability for exactly these things to happen. And then, and this is maybe what I should have written on here, the ability to have human conversations, including the difficult ones. If I could do one thing instantly, and every manager at SoundCloud would be able to do it, it is having difficult conversations. The ones where you're like, do I really have to have them? Oh, how do I say this so that I don't get hurt? Where you really just go, all right, look, we need to talk about this. If that instantly was there, that would be absolutely amazing, because I think with those ingredients you get to that point, right, where people are willing to take the risk. Though to be honest, I also feel like that sounds utterly scary, right? I'm super self-reflective, and I don't think I would be able to handle that, because I'm too much of an introvert, I don't know, but it just this full transparency thing is even for me too scary. But I think that's exactly the uncomfortable part, is exactly where growth happens, right? So
But this is an awesome introduction for this difficult conversation. As you're saying, okay, maybe, you know, it's scary for me, I'm vulnerable, I don't know if I really like it that way but I feel like we should. So, and this really quite often don't happen, because in my opinion, managers quite often think there's an ideal type of manager, and he's dominant, and he's like directing, and he's giving orders, and this is kind of stereotypes defining this, from Oliver Samba to Steve Jobs, and they're like a very a type which is going through the top, going through the roof, and this is something, if I'm not educated in terms of soft skills, communication skills, decision-making skills, then I'm thinking, okay, I have to be like that. And quite often I think this is the easiest way to handle with this new title I have on my shoulder.
Because going back to the transparency, so we have this, we actually don't use email. What we do use is Slack, and they're all open channels. We have 200 open Slack channels, and it's again to do with how do we communicate with each other, and we hold each other accountable, because if you write emails, private emails to each other, okay, it's somewhere hidden. But what we do is every conversation is on a Slack channel, so you can always point back, and if someone says someone will do something and they haven't done it, so okay, go back. The other thing that we do is, so we do have a tool and where we have our goals, quarterly goals, and again, for how do managers become better managers, and again, driven from the CEO, is, okay, we have our quarterly, so we're at the end of the quarter 4, so we see how did we do on our goals, and then we write a self-reflection report. So the CEO started, and he wrote 5 points that he did well, but also 5 points that he did badly. And that is immediately posted onto the Slack channel, and is for everyone to see, 3 continents, 500 people. And so he makes sure that all of his reports are doing the same. So imagine your head of finance, your head of product, your CTO writing the good stuff, but also the stuff that they haven't done well. And then because as it goes onto the Slack channel, and if people are really truly honest, we see the like rating go through the roof because the manager has been so open and admitted publicly that they have done something wrong. But if you admit it, like the relief that comes from it, and then you see the reaction to that, and then you can move on. So it's a lot in companies, like things have happened, and it's somewhere under the carpet, and let's not talk about it, but it will come up. But by just admitting it publicly, having people like it, let's close it and stop the politics.
That is really radical transparency, public failure. That is very extreme. We have another 5 minutes before we started a little bit late, so therefore. But one more question that I do have before we then go to the Q&A and you guys come into play. Just going back into that training, what can HR do to help managers? What are some of the courses that you have been running? What did you see successful? And then from your perspective, how do you support it from the other way around?
So I think I would start with a clear definition of what does leadership or people management mean to you, and that should not be defined from above, but that should be a conversation, because that's the first change that's happening. It's kind of the first intervention, is creating that conversation around what do we actually want to be as people managers. That's the biggest thing I think you can do. And yes, you can then provide external input and do management development programs. We have 2, one for kind of leaders and managers, and then for leaders of leaders and managers of managers. The content is very similar, it's just the cases tend to be different in the number of the experience that you see. There's kind of cross in between group coaching and peer coaching going on. But really, like, if you start talking about expectations, you will make most of the change happen, because again, I find that in this organization there is the knowledge is there. It's just that you have to create the forum to share it. You don't necessarily need all of it from the outside.
But also with the difficult conversations that you mentioned, that is the key. Do you have any plans, or do you have any training to help people actually have those difficult conversations?
So we do have, we have a classic feedback training, which few people remember ever happened. And actually for the next year, this is one of our big things. And actually I would like to redesign our complete feedback process so that it does not happen in the tool, but the tool is a guideline, and then you have that conversation in person. Because if you use tools to keep people from having conversations and then you expect them to have conversations, that's a bit strange. So I am trying to re-engineer the process in a way that, yes, indeed, we have conversations, and then we look at the culture, right? Where do we need to do this more? Where can we change things we do? And go from, we love Slack, right? But for us, if we're trying to have conversations, posting that on Slack is going to have a very different effect. And I'm actually trying to get humans to talk to each other. That's like my big goal for next year.
We have one program that, so we also believe in there's a lot of knowledge already from within, and so we have our leadership academy, and that's for everyone who is leading, managing people, even just one person. And we rotate. There's one topic being set up, and then let's have a conversation. Let's learn from each other.
First, individually in our company right now at the Trainer Academy, we have like several different techniques in form of we educate each other. So everybody has a topic, and we use the training techniques to give the others an idea of what is the topic, what is the idea behind. So we try to have a very high level of self-development, of getting new ideas in our heads, and sucking ideas of any kind into the company. And in our trainings, we have the management trainer, which is a certified education which helps people to be a person like a learning architect. So being able to give what I have in my head into a group of 10 to 15 people, and very, very often as a manager you're in directly that position. The other position you're quite often is moderating. Yeah, so there are different kinds of groups, they have different ideas. So you as a manager are not the opinion leader, you are the moderator of the situation. But this needs techniques as well. Yeah, you have to be able to ask the right questions, you have to be able to put your opinion out of the room. So it's not about you, it's about the team. So in this, again, it's a technique you have to learn. It's like a presentation skill. Yeah, and this skills you can get in the Trainer Academy from like the certified trainer education, or there's a leadership education coming up next year where we have 6 modules from strategic management over communication skills, over decision making, over recruiting and retention, over mentoring, coaching, training skills. So it's kind of, there was a request from Gallup, I think, what are the most important skills for managers and leaders, and we just said, okay, let's take from this huge request like the 6 most important and make management skills, communication skills, decision making skills, retention and recruiting, and developing your team, so mentoring, coaching, training.
I would actually like to add something that I think personally is very important, which is it should be possible for people to make a conscious and authentic decision not to want to develop like crazy at any given point. And I think this is really important for health reasons, for work-life balance reasons. And yeah, basically, so, I mean, I'll be very open, right? Like I had a burnout not too long ago, and the reason for that was I had a child, I worked almost full time, I went back to 3 days, switched jobs, all of this stuff. And you do a lot of things in your life, and I don't think the expectation is fair or even appropriate to expect from everybody to develop and to learn new things at all times, because learning is a change process, and change processes take energy. So I think every human being should have the right to decide at what point do I want to grow in which area, and it should be possible to say, look, actually right now lots of stuff is going on, I'm actually okay where I am, and that there should not be bias against that, right? So that it's okay to be where you are at for a while, and then to reevaluate. Because I feel like, especially kind of in these kinds of companies that we work in, there is such a bias. I mean, look at it. 20 under 20, 25 under 25, 30 under 30, right? Grow faster, do more brilliant things, achieve more, learn, expand your horizon. But, you know, you need to take a break, and that needs to be okay. So I am personally also, like, if we can get to a point where those development conversations might also be stagnation conversation, and if that's okay, that would be ace. So I'm planting seeds in your heads that that should be okay too.
Amazing, thank you. Is there, do you have, like, traditionally I think it's always like moving up the career ladder, right? And we started off with management as like going up, but actually at Marley Spoon it is like the bottom of the role. So if that was always traditionally the way to move up, do you have dedicated paths for individual contributors to not grow or develop further if they wanted to without feeling that they're...
Yeah, we have the
Yeah.
individual contributor path, which happened. It started off with tech. It's also a thing in product management now, which is very nice to see. I think that's really important, and it's part of also recognition of different personality types, preferences, and skills, right? Sadly, the higher you go, the less often you see, at least in our organization, that separation. At some point, it tends to come naturally that all of a sudden you are a people manager. I would love to be able to separate that more. I know Nokia at scale, obviously, I mean, you had like up to the highest level, you also had engineers that didn't need to do people management. I would love to see that more strict. It's probably a function of the scale of the organization, but to be fair, I think it's a recognition of how different these skills are, and that not everybody will be good at all of them, and that's not necessarily a reasonable expectation to have, and should not have to be a preference. So up to a certain level, it's there. I think it's admirable and should be the goal to get that all the way through. I still think things like communication styles, right, because you become an amplifier. There is a certain extent of tools that are important, like communication styles, understanding, because you're not going to be as effective otherwise also, right? If you're amplifying, you need to know how to send that message and how to understand people's reaction to you. But the rest of the core people management stuff, I don't think that should be necessary. And I actually like it when people know they're not good at it and then try and actually have somebody do that who knows what they're doing.
Thank you, and thank you for your honesty. Okay, couple of words before we go into the Q&A.
Yes, what I would like to add is personal development should and stay fun, because if it's not, and if it's like if I feel driven, or if I feel forced to become better because everybody else around me has done so much great stuff, I think it's going in the wrong direction, because as you said, maybe slowing down in this fast environment is kind of a development. It's also a development. It's not like going up, but it's more like going in and become more yourself and become more true and become more reflected. And this is something which is not fast, and it's not definitely not instantly going up, but it's more satisfying than just in the being fast. And being fast, I think, is on a daily basis something which is like the new Darwin. The person who is the fastest person is winning. But if you're the fastest person in the wrong thing, then congratulations. I think you're not coming there where you want to go. And therefore, I really say I love startups, but I don't like the speed in terms of it just about growing.
Depends on the startup.
Yeah, it's really about, I'm instantly love details, and they're nowhere. It's very, very often it's just about the next round. It's just about being fast, and I think quite often it's too fast, even for the personalities, for the persons who's 24, managing 20 people, it doesn't work.
For me, it's not about being fast, it's about being in charge. You are in charge of your own life, and you are in charge also for creating opportunities. And if you are connected within the organization, there are so many opportunities. And for me, when people come to me and they say, I need a career change, so give me a career change, then I'm just, my first test always is like, here are a few meetups you could go to, and then I see the face go down, and I'm like, so what's up? "Yeah, well, I don't have time for that." So, okay, well, you want to be in charge of your life, of your career, then make an effort and go out and meet all these people who are also interested in that very same topic that you are, and then create opportunities. For me, I don't personally feel responsible for people's career if they don't feel that they have to do something for it.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, this time just flies by too fast. It's not quite enough to go really, really deep into this very hard human problem that we have in organizations. But thank you so much for sharing, first of all, and so openly.
Thank you for having us.
Now, I have millions of questions left, but maybe you guys in the audience also have some questions.
Thank you. Cindy, you mentioned that your boss takes care that you do not feel too comfortable in your company. How does he do that?
To be honest, this is the first job that I've really gone and cried. How does he? So he's really making sure that I am staying extremely focused, and he's yeah. Well, how does he do that? So he sets high expectations, lots of challenges along the way. And from the moment that I feel like that I've accomplished something, then there is the next. So that some people can deal with that, and some don't. But for me, I feel like in the last couple of months that I've finally made a proper personal development, but that I was lacking before.
Thank you.
Since we were talking about how we have to have difficult conversations with people, I think it is also difficult after the difficult conversation. Once you've had that difficult conversation, can you tell me like kind of an example of one, and then how you handled the communication with them afterwards?
We have a high five culture. So as soon as we have like the idea of we have done something good or we achieved something, we give each other high fives. And the other startup in our big office right now, they're quite annoyed because we have so many high fives. And we have even star high fives, so in a group. Yeah. Therefore we really try to show each other that we have a new common ground, and having back our humor, positivity idea of culture. And we are trying to go around the problem as soon as we have found it again. So I think we are not happy until we are happy again. Makes sense? No.
So I try and frame the conversation very explicitly around, this difficult conversation is not a personal one. It's one in this business context, and here's how I'm going to react afterwards. And then I try and live up to that, right? So it's mostly about me checking my filter and taking the other person's reaction not personally, because they will be going through a change process. I've had lots of time to prepare. They might just be like, oh, shit, this really hit me out of nowhere. So I'm also being very explicit around like, look, this is going to be tough for you. If you need time, take that time. I understand that I'm not going to treat you any differently. Here's what's going to happen. So I am very explicit around these things, and then I basically follow up with that. And I give the other person time to deal with that because, they might need it.
So the philosophy that I always bring into companies is I have, let's say, there are 4 employee life cycles. The one is you acquire. Once you've acquired them, you need to enable them. Once they're enabled, they need to, or they want to grow, or not. And then you have the connect. And connect is also offboarding. for me, it's very important that whoever we bring into the organization, that we at all times can continue to look each other in the eye, even if we have to offboard. So therefore every conversation needs to be open, honest, and a win-win for everyone.
So this sort of came up in the very beginning when we were talking about empathy, but the difference between managers and leaders and having that as a title versus your role. So I'm curious, in all of the organizations that you work in, how do you help your managers and those who don't have the title of manager step into leadership?
We make that distinction explicit, and we talk about what it means to lead and that anybody's leading, right? So we talk about what it means, and that leadership has nothing to do with an org chart. It has something to do with how much direction you're giving or facilitating, and I think that solves that problem immediately. But it is vocab to be wary of, right? If your mailing list is called senior leaders or like leaders at, and then that's specific people in the org chart, you're attaching a meaning to that word. So it's definitely a vocabulary exercise that has to be very consistent, is to make it explicit and then follow through with it and make sure the language you use is consistent that way. And that way it's worked for us, at least. I think it's fairly clear.
I think also leadership is an informal position you take. So if there is, like, we have been at school and there was, who wants to be the classmate, or how it's called, and like 80% of the eyes go to one person. So he didn't even raise the hand, or she, but everybody knew who should it be. And it's the person who's in stormy situation, has a strong voice, has a direction, has an idea. And I think this is nothing you have on your shoulder or on your card. It's something, if you take responsible for a group or a situation, you instantly lead. And therefore, it's, as you said, I think it's not on the organizational diagram.
So this, by the way, is a brilliant way how bias against certain levels of privilege can come in. So I would strongly encourage you to, at this point, actively go and sponsor people that you feel like may not feel like they have the right to do this, because you might just not feel comfortable to assume that responsibility. So that's exactly how it gets difficult for people who haven't grown up feeling like they should run the world. But that might be very, very good at running the world if they were only let to be. I don't want to go into current events, but yes.
Just going back to culture and the idea of building a culture, I just wondered how much stock you place in, things like team events and, putting a lot of resources into perks and, things that a lot of Berlin startups are very proficient at the moment, and, how much of that is actually just about having a lot of feedback and one-on-one, and, and how important are events and, building team activities?
So we have just about the money to operate, so we don't have loads of millions spare on the bank account. So we're a very rational organization. Like, we want to be profitable, we want to be as least dependent on investors as possible, and it is very clear to everyone in the organization. So we go rationally about perks. We have the minimum, and then we have every once in a while a very good event. So
I think with the funding situation changes the perk situation normally. I think what's most important, or the most, and I'm not involved in these, and I've only taken on the L&D role, so I can give you my perspective on it, but I'm not a decision maker in this at all. But I feel like what it mostly does is it give you a signal for the kinds of, basically what we create nowadays is quite often a family-like environment, even though it's a business context. So the perks are then used to kind of establish that kind of context and the expectation of how familiar and how authentic we want you to be with people. And then sometimes, things get difficult when your expectations are no longer met because it is a business context, different conversation. But I think the perks kind of come from this expectation of wanting to make you feel appreciated and also set the tone for the kind of environment that you want to have. So the ping pong table has to be there. Some of it is kind of image and looking good on Instagram. Some of it is, you know, there's regular feedback surveys of like, what do you actually like? Yeah, but I think, for example, like one example that isn't perk related is I love the interior design of our office because it has one cafe. And that brings everybody together because everybody wants coffee or tea and it's one spot. That's not a perk, but that's a choice that is used to create that vibe that has nothing to do with money in that case.
When I joined the company, and then I was waiting in a queue at the coffee machine, and I was like, okay, if we are operationally doing so well, why is the coffee machine part not sorted? And then the people told me in the line as I was waiting, I said, Cindy, do you have any idea how many good conversations have come from standing in the queue waiting to make your coffee? So that is, the coffee machine is connecting people.
I think in general, it's a little bit like the same question as how often should you go in a theme park with your kids to be a good parent. I think that's not something you should count, or it's the wrong KPI in terms of, okay, how much should be spent on a person or whatever. It's again about the idea, it's about how much it's really felt, how much it's really put idea into it. I think it's really about the connecting and not about how nice the Instagram pictures are in the end. But for some, maybe it's an idea behind.
I think it's just a clear branding aspect. I think I would lie if it wasn't to our advantage to be a larger brand also when hiring people, right? And if you have the cool offices, you do get more press. So I think that is certainly an aspect. And it feels nice. Like you move into your office and it's super shiny. Like that does feel nice, but I fully agree, right? Like, yes, it's nice to go to that amusement park, but it's not necessary. There are other things you can do, and it depends on your situation. If you've raised the expectation once that you'll always be in an amusement park, you better not stop going. Like.
But also, money aside, there are so many little things that one can do, right? I mean, we had one launch of a new product where the CEO baked a cake as a sort of launch, and we all got together. I thought that was a really nice sort of way of getting everyone together and showing, like, it wasn't money or anything else, but it was like the CEO and founder and father of two bakes a cake. It was great. I thought that showed a lot. Any other question left in the audience? We are up with our hour, but it was, is there any? No? So then please join me once more for thanking Go Euro and our fantastic panelists for sharing so openly today. And please stay on for more drinks and food. We'll be hanging out and continuing that conversation offline. Thank you.